Hello and welcome to the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. This is a podcast to help you find peace with food and overcome disordered eating. And I'm Harriet Frew, aka the Eating Disorder Therapist. And I'm so excited to share with you all kinds of stories, tips, information and guest interviews to help you on your journey in finding peace with food. So thank you so much for listening today. Now today I have another guest and I have Joyfull Joy on the show. Now Joyfull Joy is a mental health advocate and eating disorder survivor who uses her 13-year battle with anorexia, depression, anxiety and BPD to help others overcome their eating disorder, support their mental health and learn to love their body. And Joyfull Joy also has a podcast called Joyfull, which is focused on mental health, eating disorder recovery, and generally bringing joy to life. Now, I first was introduced to Joy on Instagram, and I'm so inspired by her content and her positivity and how she really shares with such openness, which is really, really helpful to so many people. So I'm really looking forward to this interview. Let's get to it. Hi, Joy. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Joy, could you just tell us a little bit more about sort of who you are and kind of what you're doing at the moment?
So, my name is Joyfull Joy on Instagram, and it's what I do. I am a mental health advocate. I talk about eating disorder recovery and general mental health stuff. I do other stuff to earn money and keep myself going, but this is kind of my main passion is helping other people through my own experiences.
Brilliant. Sounds really great. And I think I know just from when I've been sort of following you on Instagram, Joy, I just think your messages are really inspiring and very hopeful and really encouraging, because I think from what I understand as well, you've come from quite a dark place, but you've worked really hard on your recovery and, you know, you're in a very different place now.
Completely, yeah. And it's been a really long process. And I think that's why I wanted to make something good out of it and help other people and kind of give an inspiring message that you can recover, because it doesn't have to take as long or as painful a process as it did for me.
Sure. So Joy, could you tell us just a little bit about sort of your story and sort of, you know, just how you came to develop an eating disorder and a bit more about that?
Sure. So I started when I was younger. I was diagnosed with depression when I was about 11 years old. I had suffered quite bad bullying and my at-home life was quite difficult. I had a parent who had very severe mental health issues, and my parents were going through the process of their marriage falling apart. So there wasn't really a safe space for me because school was unsafe and home was challenging. And there's a lot of things that made me grow up quite quickly. And when my parents split up and my dad moved out, I felt everything was out of control. And it was kind of the only thing that I could control was what I was eating. Mm-hmm. And it got bad quite quickly. And I was sent to my first eating disorder clinic when I was 14. So I was in my GCSE, when I was in the eating disorder clinic, I was actually in my final GCSE year. So I missed a whole term of that year. And that was kind of my main motivation for getting out. It wasn't actually getting better. It was just being able to complete my GCSEs. And when I kind of managed fairly well after that, but when school finished, everything felt out of control again. So I turned back to my eating disorder as it was like the place of comfort. It's where I felt safe, where I could control everything was within the eating disorder. And I was sent to my second eating disorder clinic, and this time kind of knew the tricks of the trade, knew how to get out. So played the part, ate all the food I needed to, and then left and relapsed very quickly. But the head of the local eating disorder services near me, in the county that I grew up in, basically said to me that I didn't have an eating disorder, that I'd been making it up, and that they weren't going to help me anymore. So it just felt like all the doors were shut and there was no real future. But thankfully, I had a mother who was really, really just a great support and fought my corner. And we connected with a local eating disorder charity in my county. And we connected with an eating disorder dietitian who my mum knew through other people. And all those things helped me get back on track. I had a mentor who was someone who recovered from eating disorder, and that was really valuable. But it was all to get better to go to drama school. I wanted to be an actor, and I eventually got in, but I was just in this constant state of quasi recovery. And so that meant that I relapsed several times. I relapsed at drama school. I relapsed after drama school. And it took until 2 years ago when my mental health was at an all-time low, and I was just suicidal. I didn't want to live anymore. My emotions were everywhere, and I just didn't see like it getting any better. But I was signed off from work, and I kind of realized in that time that if I continued on the path I was going, it wasn't going to get any better. I'd spent 13 years of my life starving myself, controlling the size of my body. A relationship had fallen apart. I'd lost some friends. I wasn't in control of anything at all, but the eating disorder convinced me that I was. And I just had enough. I just had enough of being hungry all the time and being exhausted all the time. And so I started recovering. And this time, no one was helping me. I started getting psychotherapy weekly. And that was the first person who kind of realized that the eating disorder was just part of the problem. It wasn't, there was a whole load of stuff that needed to be unpacked. And that was what was behind the eating disorder. It wasn't that I wanted to be, it wasn't that it wasn't an aesthetic thing. It was everything that was going on inside my head. And when I took recovery into my own hands, and I was the one that was doing everything and going like, something needs to change, that's when things started changing. That's when I was able to fully recover, because there wasn't somebody else doing something for me. It was me. I was doing all the things that I actually needed to, and what everyone had been, all the kind of toolkit that I'd been given over the years, I was actually finally using. Yeah, that's kind of my story.
Sure. Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like, it was quite a journey. And I just think what's so significant at the end, towards the end, is in a way, it was about you making that decision, wasn't it? So sort of in a way that you wanted to change, and you were really engaged and then motivated in that process.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think, parents or loved ones or partners can express their concern and say that you need to do something, or try and take back control, or you can get help from so many people. But if you're not on board, it's a really difficult to recover when you don't want to. It's really impossible. It's impossible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think motivation is just crucial, isn't it? And genuinely, coming from you, not doing it for anyone else. So Joy, can I just ask you as well, just going back on your story a little bit, when you very sort of started out controlling food and, restricting, it sounds like there was a lot of stress going on for you in your life at that time. And had you sort of consciously thought as well about wanting to lose weight, or was it more of a just kind of like you found by restricting that kind of helped you to cope? Or, could you just tell us a bit more about that?
I did want to lose weight. There's a kind of really weird, throughout my childhood, there's really weird points where suddenly I decided that I want to lose weight. Like I gave up sugar when I was 8. I became a vegetarian, trying to lose weight when I was 9. All these things where I was just really aware of my body. Yeah. I was just a child. I just had, child puppy fat. There were a lot of the kind of popular girls were quite lean and athletic, and I was very aware of my own body. So, and a lot of the bullying that was happening towards me was to do with the way I looked. I looked different. I was weird. I behaved weird. And I felt like beginning to diet and then turning into very much an eating disorder was my way of trying to be a good person, trying to be liked. And a lot of that is actually tied up with all of that. It's just this need to be to be seen as good and valuable. And that's the only way that I saw how was by losing weight at 14. To think that the only way that you have any kind of value is by being thin is terrifying.
Well, it's so true, isn't it? It is quite terrifying, but I think it's just so sad as well, isn't it, that we do live in this culture that reinforces that message. And even just like, I think like Healthy Week in schools that you have in primary school, where kind of, it's good and bad foods and sugar is demonized. And it's very easy, isn't it, to kind of, I think, if you're not feeling good about yourself, to kind of feel like, oh, well, losing weight, that's going to make me feel better.
I completely agree. And whenever I hear people say, like, when I speak to some children and they say stuff like, oh, you can't have too much chocolate because it's bad for you. It's like anything's bad for you if you have too much of it, but we shouldn't be teaching children about there being good food and bad food. Or I think a lot of that education system with the healthy plate, this is how much your plate should look like, is just, I'm not sure it's necessary to teach that to children, because it kind of instills that same thing that you were just saying of like, maybe if I lose, as an adult, you start going, if I lose weight, then maybe things will be a bit better. Like if I focus on this, then it's very strange.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Joy, as well, obviously you had like 2 inpatient admissions. Like, how was it sort of being an inpatient as a teenager as well? How was it?
It was very strange. I was kind of so numb to everything at that point that it wasn't scary that I was away from home. It was a good thing in that respect. It was just strange because I felt very aware that I was different from all of my peers, because everybody else was just getting on with their lives and doing stuff, and I was stuck in an eating disorder clinic being told that I couldn't leave, or I had to be watched at all times. I think that was the difficult thing, is constantly being watched and things being removed from you, and having to comply with things that you don't necessarily want to. I remember having a right battle about, they wanted me to engage in a mindfulness. I love mindfulness now. I talk about it all the time. But as a teenager, I just really I was that awkward teenager who just resented being told what to do. So being told to sit in a room and relax, they eventually told me that I didn't have to go anymore, because I just used to get so angry. But yeah, it was very strange. And actually both experiences were very different, because one was part of the Priory. So it was interesting the amount of funding that went into that. The NHS funded it, but it was interesting to then go to an NHS eating disorder clinic, and the comparison, it was very interesting. And also kind of sad that there is such a stark difference between the two.
Sure. So I'm assuming the NHS was a lot more basic, was it, compared to the Priory? Yeah. Just in case anyone listening has any doubt about that.
There's people there who really want you to get better, but it's a lot more.
Sure. And did you find, Joy, as well, like when you look back on the stage you were at of your eating disorder then as well, do you think as well that an inpatient admission was the thing that you kind of needed at the time?
Oh,
that's quite difficult to answer, isn't it? Because I guess at that stage you were probably in a bit of a bubble, weren't you, almost, in terms of your decisions were probably taken quite out of your hands, I would imagine.
And both times they were. The first time, they just literally the next day I was being sent to the eating disorder clinic. And the second time I was actually in a psychiatric hospital and hadn't eaten for a few weeks. And I just woke up one morning and collapsed, and woke up on a heart failure ward, and then was taken by ambulance to the eating disorder clinic. So both the times the choice was taken away from me. In retrospect, it'd be really interesting to hear other people's perspectives on this, actually, because I don't feel like having inpatient treatment was not helpful, because I was just surrounded by other anorexics. So if I could go back, I don't regret anything in life, but I'm not sure it was actually helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so tricky, isn't it? Because I think it's almost, there's a bit of a dilemma almost when someone's that ill. Almost, it seems almost the best way to support them is to kind of institutionalize them for a bit and have that intensive support. And I guess sometimes it would be much harder to deliver that intensity of support at home. But then I think on the other hand, it does take you away from your peers. It is a very controlling environment. I mean, it kind of has to be to kind of work, doesn't it? And of course, as well, like you are surrounded by other people that are struggling with the illness, which sometimes can be quite triggering. So yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that because your choices are taken away from you, and other caregivers are in control of what you're doing, how you're eating, how you're getting better. You haven't got the control or the impetus to actually make choices that are for yourself and are towards a healthy state of recovery. So I hope that in future things are moving towards that. But it's, I guess in many ways, things have developed quickly over time. And if you look back 100 years ago, things would be a lot more stark. So we're always changing, positive, developing. But yeah.
Sure. No, so just interesting way to hear your thoughts on that. And then obviously after you'd had your inpatient admissions, it sounds like you were kind of in a better place, but you were sort of still like you sort of partially recovered almost. And we sort of quite into, I think I might have heard this on your podcast, like sort of clean eating or sort of wellness and sort of the eating disorder more taking that direction.
Yes, so much so, and was just obsessed with exercising all the time. And I'd have like a treat day, and then it was right back to, like, looking back now, I cannot believe that, like, I thought that was recovered, and the amount of calories that I survived on for all those years. Like, I'm surprised that I was even able to function. But in my mind, I was like, I'm healthy. This is like how healthy people eat. This is, it was very strange. It was very, very strange.
Sure. And I think it's not uncommon, is it? I think, for one to get pulled down that kind of wellness road, and it can kind of feel like maybe when you're in it that you are doing the right thing because of all these kind of government messages and social media and everything else. I think, it can be quite easy to kind of convince ourselves maybe that we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
And yeah, exactly. You think that you're nourishing your body and being good to it by only eating what you deem to be good foods. But, life is about balance, and to only see the world in black and white by only eating clean is not a life of balance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then kind of going in terms of like kind of going off to drama school and everything, like, is that something that you had really wanted to do for a long time, or, had that been sort of like a dream or a goal for you?
Yeah, it'd been my forever thing. I'd always wanted to be an actor, and it was always the end goal. I tried to audition for drama school and had got like to final recalls, and my body, I was so ill that I didn't have the energy to do any of the physical stuff at all. And so that was kind of when I went, okay, I do actually need to try and get a little bit better. Because at that point, when I'd auditioned the first time, I'd gone into a major relapse. And so I focused all my energy on getting like what I deemed to be fully better, but was a level of better. And then, went to drama school. And in my mind, to be an actor, you needed to have a tiny body. So it kind of, in many ways, exacerbated the situation. And if I could go back and do it differently, I would have eaten a lot more and had a lot more energy for drama school. But yeah.
Yeah, no, sure. Well, I think all of us, we're kind of doing the best we can at the time, aren't we?
No, I know. Yeah.
So, and do you think as well, sort of in that whole kind of drama actor world or whatever, did you feel more of a pressure as well to, change how you look? Or, did it feel like you sort of said that you felt like as an actor, you'd have to have a smaller body? But do you think as well, did you really experience those messages around you in that world?
Oh yeah, completely. So much. I remember we had a director in second year of drama school who gave this great grandiose speech about how he'd changed this young actress's life because he'd recommended that she went on the salads and she'd lost all this weight, and now she was, XYZ in this and this. And I remember we made a pact at the end of second year that we weren't going to go on any diets before third year, and we were just going to like embrace who we were and just be, talented actresses who were whatever shape. And then in the summer over second year and third year, I relapsed again. And when I graduated and when I was working as a professional actor, on your spotlight, which is like your actor's profile, you put your weight, you can put your weight. And when you get casting calls out for like commercials or adverts, they'll say like size 6, size 8, young actress, very slim, athletic. There's all this stuff going out. And not just for commercials, for other stuff as well. And I just felt that the only way I was valuable as an actor, or I was good as an actor, was if I maintained having this frame that was the one that you see everywhere. And I remember we had this movement teacher who was like, oh my gosh, it's so boring that all we see is the same body type, when the world is such a magical place with everyone having different body sizes. And it terrifies me to think that in the future everyone will just have like a uniform body shape. And I hate to say it because like I'm not an actor anymore and I've left that world, and I'm very grateful for my time in that. And I'm very grateful that most of my, like majority of my experiences were really lovely and joyful, but it kind of is the way that you see so many of the people who are succeeding and continuously getting work I just think it's sending out really bad messages and giving really bad role models to young people to think that the only way they can become successful or famous or a good actor is if they are thin.
It's such a toxic message, isn't it? And I mean, I think I'm not surprised, Joy, that you would have relapsed in that environment, because I think anybody, even in that environment, that went in with robust self-esteem and had never had an eating disorder, would have still been extremely vulnerable to developing issues with food when you've got someone standing up kind of giving those messages.
Definitely. Yeah. And the word diet is thrown around so much with actors all the time, and I've known a fair few actresses who have recovered from an eating disorder, got an eating disorder, have disordered eating, and just not talked about.
Yeah, no, I think it's extremely common actually, isn't it? But I think, it's something that's just, it's not talked about. And I guess there's a lot of shame, and it almost becomes kind of normal in a really kind of toxic way. Sure. Well, I guess, so it sounds well for you. So did you sort of make the decision that road wasn't going to be for you in the end? Did you although you obviously really loved lots of aspects of it, did you kind of make a decision that it wasn't going to be the right career for you?
It was a bit of a shock actually when I figured out. I was trying to figure out things that weren't, when I was like starting to properly recover, like fully recover, I was looking at things that weren't bringing me joy or weren't serving me anymore. And I just realized that it hadn't been making me happy for years. I still love theatre acting, but you can't make a living from just acting on the stage. And it was just a constant state of anxiety because you're going through to audition after audition after audition. I remember having a conversation with my godfather, who's a psychologist, talking about how your brain can become addicted to cortisol when you keep putting your body under constant anxiety. And so it will recreate situations, or like you'll have panic attacks because your body is looking for anxiety everywhere. It's the fight or flight mechanic. And when I was discussing with him acting and how I wasn't sure I wanted to do it anymore, he was like, you're constantly putting yourself under all this pressure and anxiety all the time. No wonder that you've had this massive burnout because you're just under so much stress. So a lot of my friends say to me, it might not be forever. And I don't know what my forever job is, and I don't know what my forever is, but as long as I'm happy. And so I was really glad that I actually let acting go. I was shocked. I don't think 10-year-old Joy would be very happy with my decision, but I'm happy.
Sure. I mean, I guess as well, it sounds like it was a really brave and actually very wise decision as well. Because I guess it could have been quite easy, I suppose, to kind of stick with it just because you'd had this dream for so long. And, I guess it probably took quite a lot of kind of courage and self-reflection and insight to be able to kind of step back and really lay the cards on the table and be honest with yourself about how you felt about it.
Yeah, and not convince myself I was a failure. I think it's really difficult when everybody knew me as Joy the actor. So to be like, oh, actually, I'm not. I'm Joy. I'm me. there was that
Mm.
kind of trepidation of people thinking, oh, what are people going to say? Are they going to think I'm a failure? And I actually think I want to talk about it more often, actually, because I think there's real bravery in changing your mind and changing your direction, and not just doing the same thing because you feel obligated to, because that way madness
Mm.
lies. I think it's really important to reevaluate and think about what is serving you.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great point. And I think, all credit to you, Joy, as well, for being able to kind of do that at that stage. Because I think, sometimes that takes people years of like being in the wrong career to sort of, make that decision, or to really sort of touch base with their authentic self. Whereas it sounds like, I'm sure it was a bit of a kind of tricky, conflicted process, but, I think you did really well to kind of be able to do that and come out the other side.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
So can you tell us a bit more as well about, like, you were sort of saying you were just fed up with the eating disorder in the end, that you were just sort of could see that you're almost living this half life, and you're just fed up with being starved, fed up with just not being able to do the things you wanted to do. And I mean, what sort of things do you think kind of led to that decision? Like, was it when you were having therapy, and, was it kind of lots of things coming together that really started to kind of gather momentum to help you get on a different road?
Yeah, I think it was when I had the mental health breakdown and I had to go home and live with my mum. I was really aware when I actually started getting psychotherapy that I couldn't regulate my own emotions. Like I couldn't have a stable mental health because I wasn't actually feeding my brain at all.
Yeah.
So it started off as that, and I started off, gradually just making sure that I was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks. I was following like a meal plan that I remembered from being with an eating disorder dietitian. And then I started like following my curiosity. So I was like making interesting porridges and like exciting things to do with that. And then because I was doing that and I was like making, and it was like, it started off like very like healthy wellness porridge that you see, that kind of like aesthetic that you see on Instagram. But the more I started following my curiosity, the more I wanted to make more visually appealing meals and try out different recipes. And I was just following that curiosity and not listening to that voice that was saying, like, what are you doing? Like, this is not what we do. What if this happens? What if your body changes? I was just like, I need to let this go and just see what happens, and sit in that uncomfortable body feeling that you have to go through in order to come out the other side. And so when people invited me out for dinner, I would say yes, even if I'd had like pizza the night before with somebody else. I was just really feeding that child version of myself that was actually being listened to for the first time. And that's kind of what helped me keep moving down that path of recovery.
So almost being able to really, it sounds like you were kind of being much kinder to yourself, weren't you? And like almost, like you say, feeding that child part of yourself, taking care of yourself, and also being a bit more kind of creative and experimenting. And I guess just kind of like daring to go with it, sort of letting go.
Completely. And that, yeah, letting go, that's the big thing, I think.
So it sounds as well that actually once you started to let go a little bit more, be more relaxed with your eating, I guess then you were more nourished, and that really helped, did it, with your sort of emotional regulation and, being able to kind of deal with your emotions?
Yeah. And it meant, because obviously, like, I'm saying all these in like a really positive way, but at the same time, while all this was happening, I was dealing with panic attacks all the time, but I was more able to talk about how I was feeling and help myself when I was in those kind of situations, which wouldn't have happened before when I wasn't feeding myself. It would just been, I remember before I started recovering, I had this horrible panic attack where I just thought I was actually going to die. I just couldn't stop just kept going on and on and on. And one of my flatmates heard me, and I wasn't even that close to them. And he just heard me upstairs, like unable to breathe, and came upstairs and rang my mum. And my mum was saying, like, call an ambulance, because they just kind of didn't know what to do. Whereas when I was actually feeding myself and getting slowly better, I was able to talk to people. I was able to just, I think I was able to take better care, because I was taking better care of myself. I was actually able to take better care of myself, if that makes sense. And I just started celebrating all those little things that were happening because I was feeding my brain. I had more energy, and I started noting those things. What was I gaining other than weight? I wasn't focusing on like the weight aspect, or I was trying not to as much as I could. And by focusing on the positive non-scale stuff, I was able to kind of change my vision of how it all was, and keep talking about how uncomfortable I felt. I kept on talking about it as opposed to just internalizing it. And so it became the eating disorders problem, if that makes sense. If I kept on going over it in my head and spiraling myself out of control, whereas if I spoke to people about it, if I spoke about it on, because Joyfull Joy started off as me kind of just talking about getting better from a mental health breakdown, to be able to talk about it and have a community of people who understood was incredible. For the first time in my own sort of recovery, I didn't feel alone.
I think you just bring up such a good point there about just talking about it more, because I just think so many people with eating disorders, understandably, maybe for very good reasons, find it very hard to talk about how they feel, to talk openly and internalize so much of that. And I think it just leaves you feeling so lonely and isolated, doesn't it? And actually, once you start talking, you kind of unblock some of those channels, don't you? And you realize perhaps you're not alone. Other people could feel like this too.
Completely. And I think that's the difficulty as well with any mental health issue, is that you do feel like you're the only person in the world that feels all these things, not in a selfish way, not like I'm making it sound like, but you aren't aware of the fact that I think you compare yourself to everybody else and think that everybody else is perfect and normal, and they deal with emotions appropriately, and they're always mentally stable, and they never have any issues. And when things are stressful, they turn to healthy coping mechanisms. And actually, everybody's dealing with something. And the more we talk about it, the less people feel alone, the less people feel that they're different, that they're odd, that there's something wrong with them. It makes us so human. I'm about to say something really philosophical, but to suffer is to be human. It's part of life. It's how you deal with it. And it's about talking about it to others and not being alone in it. No man is an island.
No, I so agree, actually. It just makes me think of the sort of Kristen Neff stuff on self-compassion, about just how in a way we have got a shared humanity, and in a way whatever you're going through, somebody else is going to be going through it, or something very similar at that exact moment as well. We all do suffer, don't we? It's very true.
Yeah.
So Joy, how do you work to find a healthy balance with food and exercise and everything in your life today?
I constantly step outside of myself. So what I mean by it is that I'm very reflective of what I'm doing in my life. So if I have a bad body image day and I'm like, oh, well, I need to do this, I'm like, I step outside of myself and I'm like, whoa, okay, is that what you'd say to a friend? Is that what we'd actually do? So I'm constantly reflecting on what is healthy and what is unhealthy, in terms of like what is old eating disorder language and what is healthy joy language. Exercise is something that's really important to me, but it's more now something that I do to be strong. I want to be strong, and I want to be healthy, and I want to have a long life, and I want to have energy. So I have exercise in my life to get stronger, not to get smaller. And I am someone who really loves intuitive eating. I think it really helped me with my recovery. And it means that I never thought I'd say this, but there are no fear foods anymore, because everything is neutral. Everything, it's not like, oh, it's only a weekend food or it's only a birthday food. it's food. It's what's keeping me going, it's what's keeping me alive, it's what's giving me energy. That really, really, like, intuitive eating is really reframed the way that I think with food.
Yeah, no, sure. Well, it's so great to hear, Joy. I think it's just so inspiring as well for people listening to hear, because I think you've really been on quite a journey, haven't you? And you've been to sort of the real depths of an eating disorder, and you've been through the whole wellness thing, but actually you have come out the other side. And I know that hasn't been an easy, straightforward road, but, you know, you're living proof that it is possible. And I think that's just, really encouraging and inspiring for people. So, Joy, I'm going to ask you just a few quick fire questions now. So, What would your last supper 3-course meal be?
Do you know what? I was speaking to my mum about this earlier on, and she was like, that is such a morbid question. And I was like, I constantly ask my friends this, but fine. I would say, so I'm lactose intolerant, but I love cheese so much. So my starter would be some kind of like cheese board with like melty cheeses and like bread, like some artisanal bread, and some butter, all the good stuff. And my main would be steak and chips. And my dessert would be something to do with salted caramel. So maybe like cookie dough with salted caramel.
Oh no, sounds delicious. Do you have a favourite quote or mantra?
I'm finding it really difficult to pick just one. So I've got two, if that's okay, if I'm allowed to bend the rules. One is one that my mum taught me and helped me through so much. And it's a Sister Julian of Norwich quote. And it's, all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. I just find it just brings me so much peace when I'm dealing with things that are difficult. It's just to remind myself that, you know, everything is temporary and things move forward. And then my second one is one that really helped me when I started engaging in full recovery, and I actually now have it tattooed on my foot, is she who is brave is free. And I kept reminding myself that when I was going through all these difficult things and going through all these difficult emotions, is that, she who is brave is free.
Gosh, I love both of those quotes, actually. I'm going to remember them. So, the first one as well, it is really it does give you a real sense of peace and calm, doesn't it? Yeah. And the second one, I think as well, I just feel a real kind of sense of freedom hearing it. Yeah. So thank you for sharing those. And can you tell us something about you that may surprise us?
Okay, so I tried to rectify this fact earlier this evening by trying to do this thing. My stepdad used to be a gymnastics coach, so he was trying to coach me through it, and I still haven't done it. I screamed and I got scared. I have never done a forward roll.
Oh, right. Gosh, how interesting.
Never. I have a complete fear of going completely rotating upside down. So yeah, maybe I'm 28. I've never done a forward roll. I just said she was brave as free, but I couldn't even do a forward roll.
We are channeling your bravery, I think, in other directions, aren't you? More meaningful directions.
We'll see. Tomorrow's another day. I could do a forward roll tomorrow.
Absolutely. So, Joy, as well, where can people find you in terms of social media and also your podcast, and anywhere else that you want to sort of let us know about?
Yes, my Instagram is Hello Joyfull Joy, and it's the same on Facebook. I do have a blog. It's called joyfulljoy.food.blog. But my main source of energy at the moment is my podcast, which is just called Joyfull. And that's all. Joyfull is spelled. So whenever I say Joyfull Joy, Joyfull is spelled with a double L, because I want to exaggerate being full of joy. So yeah, the podcast is called Joyfull. It's on Podbean and on Spotify, but all of the links are through my bio on my Instagram.
Okay, lovely. Well, I'm sure people will be wanting to, seek out your podcast and your posts, because I think they do bring so much kind of hope and encouragement and inspiration. So, thank you for all you do with that, Joy.
Oh, thank you.
So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you sharing your story. And I know it's just going to inspire and give hope to so many people. So thanks very much.
Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed this episode just as much as I did. And do go and check out all of Joy's information in the show notes. Now, if you're not following me already, do seek me out on Instagram at the Eating Disorder Therapist. And for regular articles and blogs to your inbox, do sign up at rethinkyourbody.co.uk. If you sign up for my body image booklet, you then are on my mailing list and you will get weekly emails from me. I'm also really excited to tell you that I have launched an online course, Finding Your Food Freedom, 10 Steps Towards Intuitive Eating. And I've got 25% off this until New Year's Eve. So if you're interested in finding an affordable way to really change your relationship with food, do head as well to my website, rethinkyourbody.co.uk. And if you go to the 10 Steps to Intuitive Eating tab, you will find more info about it. Also, if you are a counsellor, therapist, dietitian, nutritionist, working in mental health, and you are interested in improving your skills and learning more about eating disorders and body image, I will be running one-day trainings at the end of January and also at the end of February, one in eating disorders, one in body image. So if you're interested in that, again, do go to my website, rethinkyourbody.co.uk. Thank you so much for listening today, and I look forward to sharing another podcast episode with you very soon.